Welcome back to the Giants Huddle. I'm Paul Dottino. And on today's program, we're going to talk about something that has a Giants connection, but also a bigger NFL connection. Everybody knows that Pat Summerall was a legendary Giant, but he was also a legendary voice of the league as he and John Madden became the ultimate TV pairing in network television history as far as pro football is concerned. Rich Podolsky joins us. He has authored a new book called Madden and Summerall. You might remember a few years ago, he did a book called You're Looking Live about CBS, the NFL Today, which exploded onto the scene. He was a writer with CBS Sports for a while. And Rich, we're so glad you could join us for this spinoff because as someone who certainly lived those times, it was outstanding to relive some of those memories.
Yeah, feel free to show that book cover, Paul. You were just about to.
There you go.
Now they know what they're going to buy. Thank you. Yeah, I worked at CBS Sports with both of these guys. And in fact, I knew John Madden from my days as a reporter covering the Miami Dolphins and all those great games with the Raiders. So when John came to CBS in 1979, myself and Jimmy the Greek were the only two people he knew. And we certainly had a lot of fun together.
All right, Rich, I want to break this down into a few different areas because there are so many different twists and stories in the book, and I don't want to give it all away because that would spoil it for people. But there are a few key points or moments that I think I'd like to address with you here, maybe for a little more color and background. Now,
Sure.
For example, when Summerall and Madden get together, now that in itself is kind of crazy because as I read your book and I saw that, Madden did some games with Vince Scully. He did some games with Pat Summerall. The people at CBS had to figure out, okay, who are we going to pair him with? I can't even imagine what would have happened had Madden wound up being paired with Scully. It would have changed the course of NFL television history.
Exactly. I'll give you just a short background on that. The new president of CBS Sports was a big Scully fan, and he was a big Madden fan. He wanted to break up Summerall and Brookshire, who were the number one team prior to that, prior to 1980, because of their escapades, drinking on weekends, doing games. So he broke them up, and he brought in a guy named Terry O'Neill to run NFL for CBS, and O'Neill agreed that Madden could be the number one analyst, even though he hadn't had the experience yet, and he really wasn't the John Madden we all grew to know. But he showed a lot of promise. But O'Neill wanted Summerall to be the play-by-play guy because Madden liked to talk and tell his stories, and Summerall was known for being brief. He believed in brevity. If somebody could say something in 10 words, Summerall could say it in 5. He could lead you in and get out. And then if Madden was out on a limb, he'd pull him back in and he'd be set for the next play. He was the most unselfish broadcaster as a play-by-play guy when it came to working with a guy named like John Madden. Now, Summerall had been the number one guy, and he didn't like the fact at all that in 1981, it was a contest to see who would be Madden's partner. The new boss, Van Sauter, wanted Scully. Scully was an LA guy. Sauter was an LA guy, and they all had the same agent. But Terry O'Neill knew that wasn't going to work. Scully loved to talk. Madden loved to talk. And O'Neill said, by halftime, the viewer will be wrung out. So we'll do it this way if you'll agree to it. And Sauter agreed to it. The first 4 weeks of the season, Madden worked with Scully. The next 4 in October, he worked with Summerall. And on October 26th, the executives all voted, and they all voted for Summerall. And Sauter went along with that.
All right, now let's go backwards just a tad from that point, because as I read your book, I found out that Summerall, by a fluke, a call from CBS Radio to his roommate, Charlie Connolly, back in '62, when Summerall thought he might be playing another year, his entry into broadcasting, which actually started this whole ball rolling, was kind of a fluke anyway, because he came in for an audition because Connolly was going in for an audition. And that's what got Summerall involved into broadcasting in the first place. And Madden, who had won a Super Bowl as a coach with the Raiders, remember, Summerall was a kicker with the Giants. Madden wasn't originally interested in getting into broadcasting. And in fact, NBC, which was the AFC network, didn't want him because they didn't think he looked the part. So this is pretty wild how these things kind of developed from the very beginning.
You've got it right on the nose, Paul. Don Ohlmeyer at NBC told a producer, look at him, he's a mess. We're not going to put him on the air. And the guy was flabbergasted because he knew how good Madden was. But Madden didn't want to work with broadcasters. When he was first approached by Barry Frank, an agent for IMG, that CBS wanted to give him 4 or 5 games, he said, I don't know. Those guys are a bunch of hairdos, like Howard Cosell, a real bunch of hairdos. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't do their work, and they're often wrong, and I don't want to be associated with them. Maybe in a couple of years. And Barry Frank, who was a wise agent, said, John, you won the Super Bowl the year before last, but in a couple of years, they may not want you. And Madden thought about that, and he said, you're right. 4 or 5 games, I'll give it a shot. I'll see if I like it or not. And that's how it started. And that first year, I won't say he was awful, but he was miles and miles away from being good. And I was a friend of his. And I'm telling you, he wasn't good. He was mediocre at best. And the reason was he didn't know how to be an analyst. He just kept trying, and nobody helped him at CBS. And they kept putting him with a different play-by-play guy, a different producer and director each game he did. And that didn't help either. He couldn't get in any rhythm. And finally, he started to hone it down. He watched his own tapes. He said, I know I have to cut back on my stories. But it was a tough go that first year. And the first year ended with his 4th and final game on Thanksgiving Sunday with Pat Summerall, of all people, by accident. Brookshire was supposed to be doing that game with him, and Brookshire went to his daughter's coming out party instead. They plugged in Madden, and the two of them worked together for the first time at a Tampa game. Now, none of Madden's games were going back to New York. They were just going to Tampa and Minnesota or wherever while he was getting his footing. And Summerall thought Madden had some promise also, but he certainly, I watched that game on YouTube. He certainly wasn't the John Madden we all grew to love. The great storyteller, the sound effects. There was no writing on the TV screen that at that time, and that was his last game. And he had improved some, but who knows? It was really up in the air whether they bring him back.
Huddle up, get in here. If you're lined up here, you gotta go over the middle with it to score.
Right. How do we make that happen?
I don't know, but Citizens does.
Make sense of your money with Citizens, official bank of Eli Manning.
Right. I think it's very interesting when we look at how circumstances kind of worked out. You talk in the book about there's a Super Bowl luncheon for a bunch of advertising execs and VIPs. And apparently at that luncheon, Madden just is his gregarious self. And that's kind of what turned CBS on to the fact that, you know what, maybe there is something more here. And he became more of a teacher in the booth than just a storyteller. And that seemed to be a pivot into how he would, develop his style over the course of his announcing career.
Yeah, that was a big moment in his career, that big TV Arts and Sciences luncheon 3 days before the Super Bowl. CBS put it on in the ballroom of the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. 500 executives, advertisers, media, NFL people, you name it, they were all there. Deus was Brent Musburger at one end, Pete Rozelle at the other end, and in between 3 Super Bowl coaches working for CBS, George Allen, Hank Stram, and John Madden. And when it was Madden's turn to talk, he got up and walked down the row on the dais from behind, all the way down to where Pete Rozelle was. And the question somebody asked in the audience is, would you ever be a coach again? And Madden had totally ignored the question. He walked down to where Rozelle was, put his hand on Rozelle's shoulder and squeezed and said, you know, people ask me all the time what I think about NFL officiating. And from there, he went into this 5-minute routine. It could have been on Johnny Carson. That's how funny it was. And the whole place was in an uproar, laughing hysterically. And the CBS execs who thought that they might not be bringing him back, they all got together and they realized he's just not another ex-coach wanting to be an announcer. He is someone to be reckoned with. They finally saw him for what he could be. And from there, they moved him up. They worked him only with Gary Bender the second year, only the same producer and director the second year, and he did improve. And,
I think.
And
go
also,
ahead, Rick. I'm sorry.
Also, just a quick note: that second year, which was 1980, the Miller Lite commercial started, and Madden was the guy breaking through the wall, going up to the bar, grabbing a beer, and saying, "Tastes great, less filling," and everybody loved him in those commercials, and that's how he captured the heart and mind of the new CBS president, Van Sauter.
Well, I think one of the things that we all take for granted in this announcing business today is how we prepare for a game, how the crews work a game, the different levels of the network cast, from the national cast to the regional cast, et cetera, and of course the telestrator. But there are so many facets to NFL coverage today that we actually owe to Madden and his pairing with Summerall, because when he got together with Pat at CBS and with Terry O'Neill, they basically changed the way that networks would get ready to cover a game and how they actually would cover the game in game with things such as the telestrator. I found that to be very fascinating.
It was a total change, by the way. Before the Madden and Summerall days, what would happen is the day before the game, the producer, director, and the play-by-play guy and the analyst would meet with the PR guys at the site of the game. PR guys would go over the 3-deep roster, the pronunciation of the tough names, who was hurt. And then everybody would go out and have dinner and drink. And if it was Summerall and Brookshire, you were lucky if they showed up on Sunday. Madden started taking the train because he was claustrophobic, got there 2 days early instead of just the day before. He started going to practices. He found out he could get so much more information talking to coaches and players at the practices. Terry O'Neill goes to Val Pinchback at the NFL and says, we want access in meetings before the game. And Val says, you want what? Nobody had ever done that before. And he said, we promise not to reveal anything before the game. And he gave him access. And Summerall and Madden and Terry O'Neill were in on these meetings. They taped all the players and the coaches. They found out what the strategy was. And then they went back to the producer's suite Saturday night, and Madden would put on a film study for all the crew. He would keep the room at 59 degrees to make sure everybody was watching. And he showed them the plays to expect. Now, if you knew all the questions to a test before you took the test, it would be a lot easier. That's how he changed the way games were broadcast. Plus the fact that with this pair, it was like peanut butter meeting jelly for the first time. Summerall and Madden working together when they finally worked together in '81. They changed the whole dynamic of the broadcast, with the analyst now being the center of attention. And Madden became the guy we all knew. He became the colorful, great analyst. He became the guy who could simultaneously coach both teams on the field at the same time while giving you all sorts of great stuff about the players. And Summerall gave himself up He could have done so much more and had in the past, gave himself up to allow Madden to be Madden.
And I think, too, Rich, it's a very fortuitous break that technology happened to advance just at the right time so that the weathermen and other stations and networks that were using a telestrator to do things about meteorology, well, all of a sudden, we had a chance, thanks to Terry O'Neill and John Madden, to incorporate that into football.
It was unbelievable. I mean, O'Neill said it was like it dropped from heaven on his desk one day. The telestrator thing, they called it the CBS chalkboard. And Madden had been complaining from the day he arrived at CBS that television doesn't know how to cover football. All you show is four guys against four guys. There are 22 guys on the field. Let's see why certain things happen. Let's show a lot more of what's going on in the game. And the telestrator allowed him to do that. And he became America's nutty football professor. He had a great knack of showing it, not just explaining it in a dull way. He made it colorful.
If you want to know how to manage 2 minutes of crunch time football, I'm your man. But if you're wondering about a long-term financial plan, you should talk to Citizens. Hey, I can also talk lawn care.
I'd like to learn about a mowing routine.
Yes, I knew I could help. Make sense of your money with Citizens.
I think the other item that I found really, really humorous was that Madden, I guess before one of the Super Bowls, to prepare the production team, went out and got a high school football team to come run plays.
That was the producer, Terry O'Neill.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, they went to great lengths. Yeah, and they taped it, and then Madden would show the plays. O'Neill knew the plays that they expected both teams to run, and they had the high school team run those plays, and then Madden would go over with the crew the night before the game. It was O'Neill was brilliant.
Oh, I don't think there's any question. And really, Rich, when you think about it, the confluence of these events, whether it be fate or guys being in the right place at the right time for whatever reason, technology coming up with exactly the right answer at the right time, so many of these stars had to align perfectly for this to happen. And then, of course, some years later, all of a sudden, CBS loses the NFL contract, and now Fox is a big player. And what do? They go after the biggest duo that you could possibly find on television.
Yeah, CBS really underplayed their chance to keep the contract because Fox was willing to overbid because they're trying to build a network. I mean, they only had 136 stations to over 200 for the big three. And those 136 stations most of them were UHF, way out in the hinterland on the dial. They weren't 1 through 20. So Murdoch was willing to overpay. CBS bid $295 a year for the next 4 years. Murdoch bid $405 or $410. He just blew it out. And CBS had a chance to match that. And Larry Tisch, who owned CBS at the time, said, I'm not losing any more money on this. Well, he learned his lesson 4 years later when they got the AFC. They paid over $400 million a year just for the AFC, and they no longer had the luxurious NFC channels.
So for 22 years, through the Super Bowl that was played early in the 2001 calendar year, Madden and Summerall dominated the National Football League airwaves. I mean, to be honest with you, Rich, I think the 70s and 80s were the golden era of NFL voices, but these guys were still the pinnacle, which goes to show you truly how elite they were. But all good things do come to an end. And I found it very interesting in reading your book about Summerall was going through some health issues and he was slowing down some. And it was kind of bittersweet because, he was still with John and John and him were such a great pair, but it kind of looked like, this is going to have to come to an end at some point. And it actually obviously did.
Yeah, the Fox executives knew that he had lost a step, so to speak, Pat, because he was also 6 years older than John. And
Right.
he definitely had a residual effect from all his drinking. He had stopped drinking in '93, but it still never left his body. It still kept on attacking him. And he had other issues. He had a brain cancer issue later on. So the Fox executives tried to give him a soft landing. They went to him and they said, "Let this be your next to last year, and in your last year, we'll have a big powwow and party everywhere you go. It'll be a great send off for you. 50 years in the NFL, one way or another." Summerall had done it all. He started as a player, tight end. He was even a rushing defensive end with Bobby Lane and the Detroit Lions when he started. Then he became a kicker and won that famous game for the Giants where
Sure.
he thought Vince Lombardi was going to congratulate him. Vince Lombardi was the offensive coach for the Giants. And he goes to the sidelines and Lombardi grabs him and says, "You son of a, you know you can't kick it that far for that 50-yard field goal." And then when he finally got into NFL broadcasting, he started as an analyst. He worked his way over to play-by-play. He had done it all. He had worked every Super Bowl. As John Madden said, there were voices before Pat Summerall. There'll be voices after Pat Summerall. But Pat was the voice of the NFL.
Well, Rich, that brings me to my final thought, and that is until reading your book, and I've been in this business for over 40 years myself, I did not know that Summerall and Madden were not as close off the air as they were on. That really did surprise me. But maybe that's part of the magic as to why they were so great together in the booth. Well, how do you assess that?
They were two completely different types of guys. Summerall liked to go hang out with the team executives, have steak dinner and drinks when he got to an event, a weekend game. And Madden liked to hang out with the crew. And they were completely different that way. Madden didn't really drink at all. I mean, there was the line in the book when his family said, "You got this chance to do the Miller Lite commercials. What do you think?" And Madden says to his wife and kids, "I don't even like beer." you know. So he wasn't a drinker at all. Summerall really lived the high life from his previous years as a morning interviewer on the radio. He would go out nights and interview people and bring them back for the morning show. So Summerall was a different type of guy completely, but they got along great. And, when things were important, they were there for each other. When John had a chance to see his two sons play each other in a college football game, Summerall was there for him. They really took each other seriously that way. But, I remember one incident when Madden went to Washington, D.C. with the young kids that Terry O'Neill hired to be his kind of associates. They were called broadcast associates. They were really gophers learning the business. And he gets to the hotel, and there's a note there for him. It's from Ethel Kennedy, the widow of the former brother of JFK, Robert F. Kennedy. And she says, "We're big fans of yours, John. We'd love to have lunch or dinner with you this weekend." And Mike Arnold, who is now a great director at CBS, was that kid in 1981. And he said, "Geez, John, are you going to go and have dinner with Ethel Kennedy?" And Madden thinks for a minute and says, "Nah, I'm going to hang out and have Mexican food with you guys." And that's how he was. So they were completely different in lifestyles that way. But there was tremendous respect for each other. They both loved the game enormously. I think if Madden hadn't gotten hurt his rookie year with the Eagles, he would have been a great lineman as well. But they were together, as I said, peanut butter and jelly, just unbelievable. And they changed the way we watched the game. You know,
Yeah,
when
no question.
that Summerall came on at 1 o'clock, you had turned on your TV. You knew it was a big game.
Oh, without a doubt. The book is Madden and Summerall, Rich Podolsky. I can't thank you enough for putting this together because not only is it a great story about two very important NFL legends in our lives, but also it really gives people insight to the behind the scenes stuff, as you did with the book that you did about the NFL today. You are looking live. It allows people a little bit of a peek as to what goes on behind the scenes, how this great game has been brought to all these millions and millions of Americans over the course of all of these years. So I just want to personally thank you for what you did because I think you did one heck of a job.
Paul, I appreciate that so much. I thank you very much. By the way, if anybody wants the book, they could go on Amazon and pre-order it now. It'll be out in 2 weeks.
Just in time for the beginning of football season. Rich, all the best to you. That'll do it for this edition of the Giants Huddle. I'm Paul Dottino. We'll see you next time.